All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Insight Salon on the art of commitment. And we'll have a couple more people streaming in over the next couple minutes. And initially, I just want to give a little bit of like a format, how I like to do these calls. I'll be sharing a lot of ideas and putting some attention on how to listen. So listening without the filters of I already know this, and without the filters of yeah, I don't agree with that, or yeah, but like listening with curiosity, listening with wonder. And it's not listening to my words so much as you're listening for something, seeing something new within yourself. You're listening for insight. You're listening for that aha moment. It might be even something that you knew conceptually or that you thought that you really had deeply, but suddenly just sinks a little bit deeper into you. And one of the ways that I like to play to acknowledge those insights when they're happening during these calls is using the chat, sort of like some back and forth with the chat. And whenever you're having an insight, or whenever there's something that just sort of clicked in as an aha, you can put an exclamation mark in the chat. And it might be including what you just saw. And sometimes it might just be like, whoa, something. You might not even know what you're getting, but you get that you're getting something. So a way to play with that is like putting the exclamation mark in the chat. It also lets me know if a bunch of people are popping that I can slow down and let people get what they're getting. If there's a lot of things that I'd love to share about today, but I'm not attached to that. I'm not attached to the information getting from over here to over there as long as you're seeing something new, seeing something fresh. And if you've got a question, you can also enter those into the chat, which hopefully I'll get a chance to get to. And one of the things that will make it more likely that I'll be able to answer questions is if they're kept really short and concise. If there's something like a lot of story, a lot of explanation, I probably won't be able to get to it. And for those who have just recently come online during this beginning, I definitely encourage you to have your video on so I can see your faces, so it can feel a bit more like I'm in the room with you, as long as it's comfortable and appropriate for you. So here we go. Everyone take a deep breath in. Exhale. Getting ready to see fresh. So we're here to talk about commitment. And first of all, one of the things I want to acknowledge is that commitment is one of those words that people don't just say commitment, they say commitment. It's one of the things I refer to as a precious word. For a lot of people, there's a lot of extra psychological weight. There's a lot of meaning. It's like, no, this isn't just like any like little thing. It's not just a cool concept. This is important. This is commitment that we're talking about. And I think that's one of the things that gets in the way of having fresh thinking about it. And it's one of the things that, ironically, when you take commitment really seriously, it's going to get in the way of getting better at whatever commitment is. So as a little way to play, if write in the chat, what's the biggest challenge that you have around commitment? Like what's something, and I just need like maybe like 3 or 4 people. Like keeping it over time, emotional activity, committing to a place. So what I'm going to start to do is, in order to sort of untangle from the weightiness of this word, I'm just going to substitute the word commitment with the word lollipop and see how like these start to sound. So like keeping lollipop over time, the like lollipopping to a place, like the like lollipop feels really huge. Lollipop conflicting with the idea of freedom. Let's see. The lollipop of picking the right person. Let's see. Knowing when it's time to release myself from a lollipop. Lollipopping to so many things. Like suddenly the weightiness of it starts to untangle. And so one of the things that I started to think about, like in creating this insight salon, is like just underneath all that, underneath all the stories, all the teachings, what is this commitment thing? And there's a lot of people where they get fairly specific about what it's supposed to look like and whether you're doing it or not. And we'll get into a little bit of that, but like, what's the subtle sense of what commitment is? And what I got to is that it's something about connecting present thought with future action or creation. Like I'm thinking about something now, talking about something now, and via some sort of commitment type of thing, I end up following through and doing that action through some sort of commitment stuff. I end up like something ends up being created in the future. And somehow I'm involved in that. So that can be our like initial playground, like anything within that territory. And the etymology of commitment is actually bringing together. So it's actually connecting the present with the future. Like that's the sense where there's some sort of active creation, connection, continuity here. But for a moment, we get to not know. We get to know less about that, about how that happens and can happen, and better or worse ways for that to happen. Because first, I want to clear up a couple of things that I'm pretty sure commitment isn't. But they're the things that most of us, that, well, actually, I'm not sure about us, but most people, most culture out there, we've got a bubble in this group. There's what they think it is. So first of all, commitment isn't personal. It's not a personality trait. Like no baby was born and say, I'm sorry, this is an uncommitted baby. They're just going to have a problem just connecting the dots. It's not going to happen for this one. Or congratulations, you have a really committed baby. They're going to say things and it will happen. And yet there's a lot of people out there who think that they're really bad at commitment. They think that it's something about them. They've taken it on as a label, as a permanent story about themselves. And like it's not. That's made up. That's one of the things that gets in the way of doing that commitment thing, is just believing that you're bad at commitment, which often becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You might get a lot better at commitment just by pretending that you're really good at it. Like there's a lot to be said for that. It's made up and it helps. So it's not something about you. Like I've seen that much. It is something that you can understand more about, you can see more about. And that's really like the function of this class, to help you understand more about commitment and let go of some of the things that it's not. It can be seen as a skill, something that you can get better at, a capacity that can be developed. And it's also not personal, and yet you might have your own idiosyncratic ways of committing. One person's commitment isn't necessarily going to look like your commitment. And to the degree that you're able or good at connecting present with future, like being good at commitment, it's not a value judgment, whether you're good or bad at it. When you're really good at commitment, like you're more aligned, you're more trustworthy, both to others and yourself. There's more power. It's kind of like having leverage. It's like having good balance, but it doesn't make you a better person. It just makes you a more capable person. So useful, not personal. And one of the, as soon as you start looking at commitment, it's kind of obvious, but still people will fall into the behavior of it that commitment is not trying. It's not the people pleasing of just saying, yeah, I'll do that. Including to yourself. There's a lot of people who will just sort of say, they'll sort of like overcommit, which really just means that they say yes to a lot of things without really realizing what they're saying yes to. And trying is the land of like people pleasing, and like there's doubt and forgetting and lots of excuses being made. Like this is usually the territory that leads people into thinking that they're bad at commitment and that it's something about them. And at the same time, because we're talking about commitment, when we're focusing on commitment, suddenly trying gets a bad rep. And I think it's just more important to know the difference, because I'm a huge fan of experimentation. I'm a huge fan of just like trying stuff, not knowing if it's going to work. Like, even like more of the work is probably that, this land of experimentation. But it's really important to know the difference. Like, I'm going to try this. I have no idea what will happen. I have no idea if it will work. I have no idea if I'll continue. I'm just trying stuff. Like, that's how we learn. That's how that's how so much growth and amazingness and magic happens. So yay for trying. But it's really helpful to know the difference between trying and commitment. And I think the most important thing to point out that commitment is not is that it's not a feeling. There's a lot of thinking about commitment as if it means really wanting it. Like I want this more, and that means that I'm committed. You can kind of tell because I'm putting a weight into it, that there's something a little off about it. It's like a deep fundamental desire. And while desire is great and it's usually part of whatever's happening in the present moment, it's like wanting it a lot in that present moment generally isn't that good in the future, because thought comes and goes, feelings come and go. One of the biggest traps that people have around commitment is that they think that commitment is the same thing as feeling like it. And you might feel like it in the time that you're making the commitment, but you might not feel like it the next hour. You might not feel like it the next morning. Like when it's time to go to the gym, suddenly you don't feel like it. And feeling like it comes and goes. So it's understandable that people equate that with commitment. but it's, yeah, it ends up not being a very functional commitment. If you're committing to something for a couple seconds or a minute, yeah, really feeling like it can probably work. You might be able to commit to something for an hour and use like feeling as commitment, but it's got a very quick expiration date using that strategy. And sort of a cousin or sort of like an outlier, an outgrowth of feeling like it is should. Like it's willpower. You need to make yourself do it. Like I'm committed to this and I'm going to beat myself up to make sure that I do this. And this one might work to a degree, but it's exhausting. And it's definitely not sustainable. It can be like a bit longer term than that minute. You might be able to beat yourself up for a week in order to keep a commitment, but it doesn't really work that well, and it's creating a lot of unnecessary noise and psychology, and it's a huge energy drain. It's one of the things I trace this back to, this beating yourselves up into doing things, is this underlying belief that we're fundamentally evil and lazy. And if that's true, it really makes sense that, yeah, we need to beat ourselves into submission. That if we want to do something into the future, like get this terrible being to perform, or to do a certain thing in the future or do things consistently, it's like, obviously we need to like use negative motivation. But that's not our nature. Our nature is actually a quiet mind and creative. Our nature is actually to be disciplined. So most of getting good at commitment is not identifying with all the psychological. It's getting all of that out of the way. There's so many people who confuse commitment with stress. And like that's why when they say the word commitment, it's like, it's commitment. This is going to be hard. It's like, what if it's going to be fun? So everyone take a deep breath. Exhale. So those are all the things that commitment isn't. So even before getting to what commitment is, like one of the ways I've heard of looking at commitment, which I've found really helpful, and it's a good entry point into the rest of this conversation, is when you let go of the psychological, when you let go of the thinking about what does it mean about me and it being difficult and such, and you start getting curious, there's also an honesty, there's a clarity. And initially, this inquiry into commitment is more observing. Like if you watch yourself, what does it seem like you're already committed to? Like in a way, we're already highly committed to so many things. It's the things that we're just doing. And you can watch yourself, like you're committed to waking up in the morning. You're committed to the routines that you're always doing. We usually think of commitment as in terms of something that we are not doing that we want to do, or that's something that we want to stop doing. But first, it's really helpful to get honest and to get clear of like, it seems like I'm committed to doing this. If someone is procrastinating, if they're procrastinating on writing their book, it's like one of the things that just helps get more clarity is like, it seems like you're committed to not writing the book right now. And if someone's like getting up each morning and spending half an hour writing, it seems like you're committed to writing. So this can begin with just the observation. And actually thinking from that frame, you can just think for yourself, like writing, journaling, by observing your life. What are you committed to? If you look at your calendar, if your calendar was actually reflecting how you spend your time, where's your time and attention going? And like, where do you invest your money? Where do you invest like your resources? That's a reflection of what you're committed to. So observing that is a good place to start, and also starts to reveal existing commitments. And you can learn a lot about how to commit by recognizing that you already have commitments and what's going on there, what's working. Even if these are commitments that are leading to results that you don't like, it helps you learn a lot about commitment itself. So the turnaround for me that I think what was the biggest insight that I've had so far about commitment is that commitment is structural, not psychological. It's a commitment is something that you actually do. And so many people are holding commitment as really intense thinking in their head, in the moment, in the present, when they're committing. And that somehow they're going to like make it happen through that intensity. The thing is, that's actually just taking it so personally that that's going to get in the way of it happening. So commitment isn't something that you have. It's not a trait. It's something you do. It's being engaged. It requires being in the world, taking action for it to make a difference. One of the quotes I love to use, back and forth on the man himself, but it's from Werner Erhard. It's important that you get clear for yourself that your only access to impacting life is action. The world does not care what you intend, how committed you are, how you feel, or what you think, and certainly it has no interest in what you want or don't want. Take a look at life as it is lived and see for yourself that the world only moves for you when you act. So it's doing something, it's taking action rather than feeling like it. It's action rather than thinking about it. It's action rather than the words that are used. Those might help, but without action, it's not a commitment. It's just thinking. And it's probably just in the moment. It's probably going to change in the next moment. So how do you take action? I'll come back around to that. It's more like something that will happen the more that this is understood. So I really think of commitment nowadays as creation, as an act of creation. Commitment as saying, I will, and meaning it. It's that bringing together of the present moment and doing something in the future, doing lots of things in the future. It's driving the action and being less about the psychology of how much you want it, like letting go of that, and being really aware and creative in the world. Like, okay, so I'm going to do this. How am I going to pull this off? And actually, first leaning into like, I'm going to do this. Commitment as a decision. Commitment as saying to yourself, I'm doing it, and meaning it. This is commitment to a path. This isn't quite guaranteeing the outcome yet. It's like this is one form of commitment as a decision. And it's commitment as like, so a decision is actually a really simple action. It doesn't need to be like rich and complex and weighty. It doesn't need to be personal. And my favorite turnaround that exhibits this comes from there's a very inspirational quote from the Scottish mountaineer W.H. Murray. And it's one of the quotes that's often associated with commitment, like because it sounds really powerful. And it's, until one is committed, there's hesitancy, the chance to draw back, always ineffectiveness. Concerning all acts of initiative and creation, there is one elementary truth, the ignorance of which kills countless ideas and splendid plans, that the moment one definitely commits oneself, then providence moves too. It's got that rah to it, like how powerful commitment is. And I do want to acknowledge that it is incredibly powerful. But what often isn't quoted is the couple sentences that were just before that quote. So I'll read those. And this is from Murray's book, The Scottish Himalayan Expedition. We hadn't really done anything. But when I said that nothing had been done, I erred in one important matter. We had definitely committed ourselves and were halfway out of our ruts. We had put down our passage money, booked a sailing to Bombay. This may sound too simple, but is great in consequence. Until one is committed, there's hesitancy, the chance to draw back, always ineffectiveness. They bought a ticket. That was the commitment. Like back in 2019, I ran my first Spartan race. The obstacle course race. Gone from like not thinking of myself as athletic at all, barely exercising at all. Fortunately, I had like a lot of time in between, but really the commitment was putting my name on a list. I bought a ticket. And the rest was just following through. There's a magic in that. When you allow commitment to be really simple, that's when it gets powerful. When you think that it needs to be powerful is when it becomes really weak. Because the power is in the structure, the power is in the simplicity, connecting the dots. Everyone take a deep breath in. Exhale. Yeah, and like as Sergey says, decide, like etymology of decide is to cut. Like it simplifies, like I'm doing this. And there's like a cascade effect that it creates this and this and this. And part of being good at commitment is the willingness to make the most of it. The willingness to make a call and keep on going. That's one of the things that eliminates the doubts, is just recognizing that doubting isn't helpful. We can be so much more adaptive and creative and powerful by making a call, making a commitment, and that we keep on going forward with a lot of awareness rather than being blinded by taking everything personally. And also, it's a way of living life that is a lot easier. So as for a how-to, to get really practical about commitment, which answers Sophia's question right now too. It's not a commitment unless there's a system. It's not just a strong, I will do this, I want to do this. It's that, and this is the world of you can count on it and meaning it. This is the world of making an actual promise and agreement. Like, if you have a flight, you don't really do what most people do with commitment. It's like, well, I'm going to try to make the flight, or I really want to make the flight, or I I scheduled it, but then I didn't do anything else. Like, you plan, when am I going to leave? It's like, oh, I need to pack. I need to make sure that it doesn't conflict with other things. I remember a story that I think it was like Steve Chandler's told, where the idea of being in the airport terminal and the flight is boarding, but he's just sitting there and like leans over to the guy next to him. It's like, I've got a problem. I don't feel like getting on the plane. I'm not committed enough. And that's what we all do. We think that we need to feel like it. We think that we need to be in a certain mood. We think that we need to have a certain psychological state. Or that we think that we need to overpower one psychological state with a bigger psychological state and like use a lot of willpower and make ourselves. It's allowing something simpler and more fundamental than our moods and feelings and psychology to be in control. It's as simple as creating a system to do things and simply doing it with a lot less thinking about it. One of the things that makes it people really good at commitment is not taking their thinking so seriously. And the people who really take their thinking seriously think that they need to take their thinking more seriously in order to be committed, which is why it's such a struggle. It's a downward spiral. So think for yourself, like, what are some of the commitments that you have or that you'd like to make? And what's a system you could create that would guarantee its fulfillment? Because this is the territory of commitments that you can count on, commitments that other people can count on. It starts to develop the skill of making commitments, because you start getting, instead of like doubting whether you will, you actually start getting like a little bit more discerning and creative. Like, hey, if I'm going to pull off this within this time frame, what will I need to do? Do I have enough time? Do I want to make this commitment? Is this something that I'm sure that I can do? What's a commitment that I can make? You might be able to try, experiment to see if you could do it in 1/10 of the time. But the commitment portion, like, it will be done by this time. I will make this happen. This will happen. What system could you put in place to make sure that it happens? And if you're receiving a commitment from someone else, this is something that you can do. It's like, well, how are you going? What are you going to do? What's your system? What are you going to do in order to make sure that this happens? Is this something that you're just intensely hoping will happen? Or is this something that will happen? Yeah. And if you're not sure if you can do it, it's not a commitment, which is awesome too. Like it's a goal, it's an intention. You can play around with a bunch of words. Um, and it's figuring out like a lot of times when there is a desire to make a commitment, I like kind of having a pairing. Like, what am I aiming for? What am I hoping I'll be able to do? What am I hoping will happen? That can be a goal or an intention. And then within that, what's the commitment? Like, I might have a goal of reaching something and a commitment to what I'm going to be doing every day, where it's like process goals, this like stuff that's within your control. Like, I'm committed to doing this with the hope of the intention that it gets me here. So it's having that discernment of what's the part of this that I can do? What's the part of this that I will do? And it's also getting honest about the parts where it's like, yeah, I don't have control over that. I'm not sure if I can rely on that. I'm not sure if you can rely on that, but I'm going to really go for it. It's knowing the difference. So one of the things, one of the skills that we start to learn as we get better at commitment, as we like see commitment more clearly as something that can be counted on, is getting a lot better at saying no. Like there's so many things that we say yes to. There's so many things that we think that we're committing to that we don't mean it. So it's getting clearer. It's like, no, that's just a goal. And actually, in order to commit to something, start with kind of realizing that probably all the things that you think are commitments are probably just intentions. And just being totally okay with that. Because it's knowing the difference is what's important. And really, like as you're developing the skill of commitment, you'll want to have very few commitments, maybe no commitments. Like imagine this, the freedom of like, oh yeah, like none of these are commitments. Like I don't know if any of this is going to happen. And that's great too. Like there's periods in life, there's territories to be in where it's like, yeah, just experiment, try stuff, have a goal, be ambitious without being attached to, without you relying on or other people relying on, like this has to work. And you can start with tiny commitments. Like if you're developing discipline, this is what I will do tomorrow morning. And I'm not committing to what I'm going to do the next morning yet, but I am going to do this tomorrow morning. And then it starts to build that skill. So inquire a little bit for yourself. What are some things that are just intentions? And do you want to keep them as just intentions? Or do you want to create a system to guarantee their fulfillment? And there's some things that are intentions or even commitments that you actually want to say no to. Once you realize that like commitments involve a lot, like it takes a lot to get on that plane. It takes a bit. There are some commitments where there's a lot of unknowns, where in order to get there, you're going to need to try a lot of things, where the things that you try won't work, but you're committed, so you're going to keep on trying. One version of commitment that I like is that commitment is recommitment. This is a bit more in the skill territory. That every day you're recommitting. As part of your system, you can be reminding yourself of these are your commitments. These are the things that I'm up to. These are the things that I will do today. It's part of the secret behind 12-step programs. It's like, no, you don't need to stop drinking forever. Just for today, don't drink. It's like, and suddenly that's much more doable. Everyone take a deep breath in. Exhale. And there's another category of being committed. And it seems like the more that you no longer identify with your psychology and you're operating in the world from this simpler place, and the more that you're getting good at commitment, you get used to saying, I will, and pulling it off. You get good at saying no to things. You get good at designing commitments that you can do. You get good at the systems. You get good at realizing that if there's a commitment, you're going to find a way. That's part of the skill. It's a cool part of the journey. Initially, it's just based on what I currently know I can pull off. But as you get better and better at this as a skill, you recognize more and more capacity of, I will do this, even though I don't know how. But I just know. There's more of a connection to wisdom here. There's more of a connection to inner knowing. And it's connected also to that expert intuition of just having a lot of practice following through. And the magical thing that happens is the ability to go all in. And that's when something this is where commitment goes from something that seems like it requires a lot of intensity, or where there's still some doubt, you're not quite sure, to utter simplicity. It's that state of, this will happen, relating to the future as if it's already happened. This is already true. It's that shift from 99% to 100%, which goes from a lot of thinking to absolute devotion. Michael Jordan, I love his quote, I've never lost a game, I just ran out of time. That's a commitment to never losing the game. It's not a commitment to not running out of time, because that sometimes happens. And this world of going all in, it's doubtless. And it's a multiplier, because the doubts get in the way. It's not thinking about going back. It's burning the boats. This is happening. And it's that confidence in the universe, where anything and everything that happens is conspiring for you to do this. no matter what it might look like to other people. It's like, oh, well, it looks like you failed and it's not going to work. It's like, nope, I don't know how yet, but this is for me. This is in service to my commitment. And it's living forward. Like, this is where that future is present. You're already living it. And it's a determination, but it's also not blind. Like, this space of being all in is actually getting out of what you think should happen. And it's getting out of any sense that you think that you control the world. It's actually much more being in harmony with the world. And these kinds of commitments need to come from that harmony. So this doesn't work where it's not the magical thinking of like, my ego really wants this, so I'm going to like declare this and make this happen. So it's not quite law of attraction type territory. This actually needs to come from the harmony of the world. It's almost like you're given this kind of commitment and you're allowing it to flow through you. So you get to ignore all the doubts. You get to expect and welcome challenges. And you're committed to meeting them, using them, riding the waves, all the while knowing that it's going to work. And we actually spend most of our life in this form of commitment, and 100% committed. It's the things that we were talking about in the observing. It's just that they fade into the background. Like, that's how simple this kind of commitment is. It's the commitments that we're not making a big deal out of. And it's recognizing that there's like larger scale versions of that we can do. And we only get in our own way when we get caught up in our thinking instead of engaging with the world. And this is engaging with the world in a deeper level, like in addition to a systematic level. Like, this is that mystical level of interacting with the world. And it's something that you start to get more and more of a taste of as you get good at the practical. And it's that like running to the edge of the cliff and still being able to stop on a dime. It's infinite flexibility in the fulfillment of the commitment. Like, I'm doing this, I have no idea which of the things that I'm trying is going to get there, but I'm going there. So you're completely undistracted. So inquire for yourself for a moment. Is there perhaps one thing in your life that you'd really like to go all in on? And you don't even need to make it a commitment right now, but even just for like floating it out there as like, if you were granted one thing that you could do this with, what might that be? And take a deep breath in. Exhale. As we're winding down, does anyone have any shares or questions? Feel free to just unmute if you do. We got a little bit of time.
Can I ask a question, Michael?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for this exploration, first of all. It's been really, really wonderful. I would like to ask to something you said in the beginning. You said that our essential nature is disciplined. And that I couldn't grasp at all. Could you speak a little bit to that? What do you mean?
This is actually like a more recent insight for me as well, as sort of one of the random aha connections I had. First of all, I've done a bunch of work on discipline, the very interesting etymology of the word. Originally in Latin, it was connected with learning, but somewhere around Middle English, I think it meant like to scourge oneself. Like at some point, the very negative motivation educational system corrupted the word discipline, so it meant like you must beat yourself into submission in order to learn. But actually, it just means like that capacity to learn, the capacity to be consistent. Like I find when there's not much on my mind, it's really easy and natural for me to be consistent. When it makes sense to do something every day, and I don't have like any dramatic thinking about it. I just do it. So that's what I mean by like our nature is disciplined.
Yeah, and does it also, is it connected to what you said that we spend most of our time in 100% commitment, meaning that we do things consistently, all in, and we completely trust, but they're so mundane that we don't notice that it's 100% commitment.
Yeah. And you might notice it also just like in bad habits that you have. Like in a way you're all in on the bad habits because you keep on doing them.
Yeah.
But also like I am all in on brushing my teeth in the morning. It happens. And it's not like I'm committed. I don't need an accountability partner for it.
Well, that sounds like a habit. Is there any difference between just a habit and commitment?
There's an overlap. They're similar. And here, I think habit is more a subset of systems of commitment, but not quite the same thing.
Hmm.
So part of a lot of commitments might be the creation of a habit or the changing, the alteration of a habit. And one of the cool things about observing, like commitment as observation of what you're up to, is you can uncover like your current systems. Right? Every system is perfect for the result that it gets. And if there's some results that you don't like, what's the system that's happening there? Which sometimes is like what you're thinking to yourself and how you react to that thinking is often what that often creates not so helpful results.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else? Both shares and questions.
I think maybe, yeah, I keep thinking about when do I let go of commitment, or should I then never commit? It feels almost impossible because I could gain wisdom or see anything. So I really were always all the way in this workshop, but that's where I get stuck. Like your future self could reveal different commitments. I don't know. Yeah. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, and it's in the level, this is different at the different levels. In the level of commitment as a skill, failing is part of the skill. Failing at commitments helps you get better at commitment. It's like, oh, I didn't think about this. Or like, oh, like I know so many people who use the most optimistic timing for when they're going to arrive somewhere. Like if they look at like driving time, well, they'll look at the driving time and they'll use like the minimum driving time without any like buffer for like getting out the door or parking or arriving. And they'll just say, it's like, oh yeah, this. I'll be there in 15 minutes. And then learning, it's like, oh, wait a second, I need to update my systems. That's part of it. And also, like, it's okay to change your mind. I think the important thing for changing a commitment, though, is that it's changing it from a higher level of consciousness from where you made the commitment. So it's not when you get reactive. It's not when you go down into your psychology and you don't feel like it, or it's inconvenient, or it's harder than you thought. Like where you're like lower on the ladder of consciousness and suddenly you want to quit. It's part of the skill is holding firm there. But if you see more, if you learn more, if like you get a deeper hit of wisdom that, oh, actually, this isn't the way. If you have new information, it's like, oh, wait a second, this isn't physically possible. Or like, actually, like new circumstance, new information, something is more important. That's a good place where you can change commitments from. So change from higher up from where you made the commitment. And when you're lower down, just follow instructions is the skill. Like, thank you. Excellent and important question. All right.
Quick question, if we have time. For I understand that with commitments, you if it's really a commitment, you're sure that this is something that you can do, and you're sure that this is something that you will do. And I kind of asked earlier, and you alluded to this with coming out from a higher place of consciousness and letting sort of the highest mind drive the boat. But what level of confidence do you need to be able to say, like, I'm sure? Because I don't think that you can be 100% sure of anything, period. Like, that's just not part of our reality in terms of you know, there can always be things that happen.
Yeah.
So
And that's where I think thinking of it as a path of mastery. It's not something that you're either good at or bad at. Like there's always more along this learning curve of commitment. So start tiny, start minuscule. Like, I'm going to pick up this pen. Yes. And expand outward from there. And
So-
eventually things that seemed that you couldn't do or can't know if you can pull off, it'll start to become, some of that stuff will start to become within reach.
So it has to do with your locus of control then? Like
Part of it, in a way, I wouldn't quite call it control, but there is a locus of experience along this path of learning commitment.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, we're at the hour. Thank you, everyone. This has been a blast. I love getting to like share these downloads. I saw like exclamation marks all over the place, so lots of insights. Feel free to share with me afterwards what you got. And yeah, we're off. Everyone have an amazing day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye,
you, Michael.
everyone. Thank you.
Thank you,
Good to
Michael.
see you all.
Yeah.
Thank you
you.
so much, Michael.
Mhm.